Hey guys, this is George with Troglodyne. You might notice a little bit different stream setup this time. We're having some technological differences here today, but my main news is what you see right here on the screen. I just released the Playwright interface for Perl to CPAN this morning after finally getting through all the issues I've been seeing for the last week or two. And let's just dive right in. So basically, the synopsis is correct, but you should probably use the example.pl that's shipped with the module, and also up here on the Git page. But I need to update the synopsis a bit. You don't even need to use JSON-PP for Booleans. It correctly coerces values now, so we don't have to worry about that. But other than that, basically all of the different things that did selectors, they're documented as instead of starting with $$ as I mentioned last video into these things. The thing that's new this time is I got scripts working, and basically I had to accept everything as essentially a function body as a string to actually get it through, because you really can't do any other way when it comes to doing JavaScript over HTTP, because this is sort of a server proxy thing, as we mentioned in the earlier video. Uh, but it's pretty straightforward, and you can refer to arguments arrays very straightforwardly through normal JavaScript techniques. And we also have asynchronous operations thanks to the async data and async module, which has been on CPAN for 20 years now, practically. It's amazing that that's the only one that actually gives me async await the way I actually want it. Almost everything else out there is just coroutines and so forth. So this led to a very simple API. Basically, with the handle, you would then do an await on whatever promise is returned to you by the evaluate, by the wait for event or wait for handle, all those sorts of things, and it'll give you the actual result from that promised event. So other than that, the thing to note is when you install, you're going to probably get a croak because it needs modules to be installed inside of user share bin, likely, which will require you to be root, and I'm just not even going to play with that. That's not even going to be close to anything portable across Windows or anything like that. But I do provide helpful instructions if you're either on Cygwin or on Linux system, so that you can actually get the node dependencies installed there correctly, because apparently node install npm-i-g, the global install, doesn't actually work. I'm not real familiar with regard to how the node ecosystem there works, but that doesn't exactly seem optimal to me. Anyways, so aside from that, I added a new method to the server called spec, which I'll go over here real quick. So you can see inside the bin, we still have the playwright.js, which is now renamed as Playwright Server, which you can just run after you install the CPAN module and have the deps set up correctly. And just let it run and run against it as much as you want to if you so desire. But it's going to be spun up on demand by the Perl code, so you don't really have to think about it. Anyways, we can see down here I made a spec URL, which is really straightforward. It's just returning the spec after we add in the order of the arguments, which we used to be doing at build time. Now we're doing it at runtime. And the other nice thing is that we don't actually have to have the API.json inside the repo, because it's shipped as a part of the Playwright module, and it's just right there next to the actual Playwright.js. So that's very handy and a lot of simplification for the server itself. So anyways, let's actually dive sort of back into what's changed about the module itself. So we can go into lib and playwright.pm. That's where the vast majority of the changes actually happened. So we changed up the begin block to be a lot simpler than it used to be. You can see here I made subroutines out of all the check stuff that was in begin so that they could be tested fairly straightforwardly. And then you can see the begin block is actually only doing the node setup check, unless you actually have a skip begin flag, which is useful for if you're doing a compile check, or if you're doing like a test or something where you want to actually not have that stuff fire. Anyways, now all that stuff is being fired inside of the constructor, where we're checking and building the spec and then building the classes, but only if the various different methods haven't already been installed at one point. So it's trying to be as efficient as it can. Um, Aside from that, we are now check and build spec is, like I said, actually firing against that spec method so that it can actually get the definition of the Playwright API dynamically, which is very nice. I don't have to read it and deal with the what apparently was a problem with the ShareDir plugin for file ShareDir and versus Diszilla. They're putting them in directories they didn't expect, and I'm not interested in just running it directly with MakeMaker because that's just a big pain in the butt. Instead, it's much simpler to just have this sit inside the server and not have to worry about it. So everything else is pretty much the same there. We don't have many other issues. The builds are passing. Coverage could be a little bit higher, but it's sort of at diminishing returns point for all this stuff. There's probably a few things I do need to hit, but I will hit later. We can sort of go over the issues here. Basically, I need to make some Mocha unit tests for the actual server itself. That should be fairly straightforward, and I'll do those at some point. But the only main big things that are questions about this is going to be the talk to with port selection. Somebody's going to trip into that at some point. And then making sure that everything actually 100% works in the API. And I'm not sure whether the upstream actually has a good test suite that I might be able to use for that, but I'm in contact with some of the Playwright people, and we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I'm going to talk about sort of next steps for Troglodyne from here. Basically, there's a few places we can go with this. The first one is I'm thinking of making like a Playwright grid server, which is very much like Selenium Grid, where you can basically, it's like a bouncer, like PG Bouncer, PG Pool, or MySQL connection pooler. The idea is that you can multiplex across multiple different backends. The ultimate idea would be that you could have a server that a service that basically just will spin up and spin down these resources on something like AWS or whatever as you need to, so that you can not really have to worry about the server maintenance, and the cost is fairly straightforward for you to understand, and it's something that you still control and can deal with, and that we might be able to build a product out of that if we want to. The other thing that we could do is I want to have a WC3 Selenium server that is powered with Playwright, because I have a feeling that that's actually going to be a heck of a lot more reliable than the actual browser drivers, which have not, in my experience, been terribly reliable. So those are probably the two things that are going to come out of this, and we'll see what kind of business opportunities develop out of that. Certainly, it seems like some automation of some of these web-based tasks for people in business purposes certainly seems like a target-rich environment. So we'll have to see how that all develops. But yeah, it looks like we're having a great time over here, and we'll have more wonderful open source software for you guys soon. All right, have a good one.